So, you can see that these principles work, and sometimes it's easy to say that they will work in the front line or in early line managers domains and spheres. But let's look at tail number 2, which looks at a completely different set of profiles where very often L&D people work. So tail number 2 pertains to senior managers and one of the biggest L&D nightmares, which is, how do we develop senior managers when already each one of them is so successful? And yet, everyone has a different development need. Somebody has a people management need, somebody has an executive presence need, somebody has a low ability to be able to deal with and understand data, and there isn't enough, minimum quorum to be able to run a classroom program for them. And plus, they're very successful, so it's very difficult to be able to give them feedback on that. And in addition to doing all of that, how do you maximize ROI? So a second tail pertains to that. We had a very brave client, and a brave client who gave us a very specific mandate. And the mandate was, for every manager, identify 2 important skills that they need to develop and give us a 10% improvement on that. So clearly, this meant that first we had to identify the skills and then we had to improve them. And therefore, just like Poonam said, we used 100% digital development center. And this time, instead of combining it with checklists, etc., we combined it with coaching and fitted it as part of a bigger academy framework that the client was using. Now, clearly, the design was easy. And, we had a 100% digital assessment center, which covered all the possible activities that you can think of. There were role plays, there was a work prioritization activity, 100% digital role plays with no human interference at all. There was the usual situational judgment test, data and analysis, the works. But the good news is that there were 200 managers and they managed to cover them in one day. Clearly, this reduced costs. And clearly, this increased scalability. Because now you can run the same assessment center for hundreds more managers without having to invest any further money in it. So, okay, we developed the assessment center and we kind of ran it. But how were we certain that we had really identified the right competencies to be able to develop them? So again, we went back to science, like we earlier talked about sample and control. This time we used a different technique. It's called the blind test. In the blind test, we got their managers to rank their subordinates and their team members, who were all senior managers, on the competencies. And then we matched the 2 competencies. And there was an 85% match between the competency mapping or the competency scaling that the managers had done for their subordinates and the competency scaling that had come from the assessment center. This clearly proved the validity of the development center assessment that had been run for them. And also it increased buy-in because now the managers also believed that we were working on the right competencies for their team members. Then, of course, it was easy. The rest of it had to do with coaching, had to do with 360-degree feedback to see whether the improvement had happened or not. Good news for us was that when we measured the skills improvement, we found 5 to 25% skill improvement had happened. And even the business metric for these people had improved, for the senior managers had improved by approximately 8%. And, for every skill, there was a different business metric that had to be managed and assessed. But it was easy to do it because we were looking at it from a data and a technology perspective. Bottom line, this client got a scalable, low-cost development center, which they can continue to use, and a one-time straightforward ROI of 55% on the first batch of 200 managers whom we assessed for them.